Welcome to the July 10th, 2023 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is being conducted with both in-person and remote participation by board members and members of the public. Remote participation by the public for the public comment agenda item, the public hearings, and any other matter for which the board allows public participation will be via the Zoom raise hand feature. If you raise your hand on Zoom, you will be enabled at an appropriate point to enter the meeting via voice or video to make a comment or ask a question. In all cases, whether in person or remote, please identify yourself by name and address for the record. Every vote will be taken by roll call. Please note that this meeting is being recorded as well as being broadcast live on the Grafton Community Television Government Channel. With that, we'll start with our traditional first item, which is public input. This is an opportunity for people who want to talk to us about something within our purview that's not otherwise on the agenda tonight. Is there anyone?
There'll be a roll call, Bob.
Oh, yeah, just a second. Since I already asked, I'm pretty sure there isn't anybody looking for recognition. Yeah, we should do a roll call.
All right. Mr. Robbins.
Present.
Mr. Davison.
Present.
I am present. Mr. Venkatraman.
Present.
And Mr. Hassinger.
I'm here too.
And staff present, Town Planner Fiona Coughlin.
Here.
And Natalia Alward.
Present.
Good.
And anyone else will get to at their agenda item.
Okay. Okay. First item. Grist Mill subdivision. Lee Kaufman resident regarding fence and landscaping maintenance.
So I can give a brief background about this, and then I will turn over to Mr. Kaufman, who is here. Mr. Kaufman lives at 96 Pleasant Street at the corner of the Grist Mill subdivision entrance. He has been having conversations back and forth with the town regarding the wooden fence and the landscaping along his property line that delineates the right-of-way from his property. Currently the developer is responsible for maintaining the fence and the landscaping, as stated in the decision and the findings. We have gone back and forth. I did meet Mr. Kaufman at his property to talk about options, about maintenance going forward. There is not a permanent operation and maintenance plan for that fence and landscaping. We did have the developer go out and fix the fence a few months ago, but ultimately, after conversing with town council, DPW, and associated parties, including the town planner who was working in Grafton at the time, the town ultimately cannot maintain the fence. The town has offered to remove the fence, but they cannot replace it or continue to maintain it once the road is accepted. The developer is currently working to assemble materials for their determination of completeness process. They are working on that now. They haven't filed anything yet with us, but that is forthcoming, and there might be an opportunity there for once upon releasing the bond for the property owner and the developer to work out, maintenance or compensation going forward. But in terms of what the town can do, unfortunately, we cannot maintain the fence and landscaping. But I do want to give Mr. Kaufman an opportunity to speak, and I also will share my screen with some photos he provided.
Come up or?
Take your pick, stand or sit.
Doesn't matter.
Whatever's more comfortable.
Lee Kaufman, 96 Pleasant Street. As Ms. Coughlin mentioned, she and I have been in communications probably for the last 2 months or so. Probably for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been trying to get some attention on this matter from Mr. Layden, Mr. McGoldrick, to absolutely no avail. The issue at hand that we have here is when the development was created, a fence about 450 feet on either side of the Gristmill Road was installed on town property. As you can see from the photos there, my property is on the left-hand side. From that fence, which is in the middle, to my property, the other way, it's probably about 6 feet, give or take. So you have my property line about 6 feet. Within that 6 feet of town property, there's plantings. You then have the decrepit fence that's there. You have an additional 3 or 4 feet of town property, town sidewalk, additional town lawn, as you can see there before you do the road. Then across the road, you kind of have the same thing on the other side. This was an issue that was raised when the development was under construction. I met with Mr. Layden and Mr. McGoldrick at the site. There was, a statement in the original documents that said that the developer shall work with myself and Mr. Wager at 94 to make sure that it looked good, if you will. When we met there, they presented us the plan, and we basically said, a wood fence in Grafton in New England? Who's going to maintain this? And we were both basically politely told, you don't have any input. The town's already approved it. They're maintaining it. We're here just to show you that we met with you, if you will. And the fence was installed. Probably up until about 3 years ago, the developer was maintaining on the left side of that fence as well as on the right side. He stopped maintaining that I think this is the third summer that he stopped maintaining it. Again, I've tried to reach out to Mr. Layden and Mr. McGoldrick to see, because the planting is completely overgrown, it's blocking the sidewalk, and we were told, town doesn't own it, nobody owns it, have fun. Not quite sure what we're going to do here. As I said, this is not small. It's about 450 feet of fencing that's been in probably for about 5 years now. I've repaired it several times. As Ms. Coughlin mentioned, the developer was out there repairing it. It's a wood fence. I don't know why anybody would have agreed to a wood fence that's stained black, but it's an eyesore. It's broken. Kids jump on it, and someone needs to be maintaining the fence and the landscaping. I mean, you can see there, people pitch in. 1 week it's the Wagers, the other week it's Mr. Wilson comes in and they kind of mow the lawn, but you can see the plants are overgrown on the sidewalk, and it's just not being maintained. And what I'd like to ask is, I'm not quite sure how the town would have approved maintenance related items on town property without a maintenance plan. I know on my property, which there is an easement for, there is an underground, I believe referred to as a drainage catch basin. I believe that's what it is. And there's a maintenance plan for that. And I'm not sure how it was overseen that there is no maintenance for the landscaping, the fence. Who's maintaining the sidewalks? Is that the DPW? Who maintains the streets? Not quite sure why this was missed, but something needs to be done there.
Until the town accepts the subdivision, which I don't think we've done.
No,
Correct.
It belongs to, everything on the developer's property
Yes.
belongs to the developer.
Yes.
After it's accepted, I think you need to talk to the DPW.
So we did.
Well,
And that's part of why.
and they work for the town administrator.
That's correct. So initially we were told, when we met with Mr. Layden and Mr. McGoldrick at the site, that the DPW did or was going to be maintaining that. Again, I'm just telling you what was told to us, and myself was there, Mr. Layden, earlier on, Mr. McGoldrick subsequently, and Mr. Wager at 94 Pleasant Street, and we were told that. Now we're being told, as this is coming closer to the, the determination of completeness hearing, that no, the DPW is not going to be maintaining it. I've tried to reach out to Mr. Broussard, as well as others, to see. I can't get a response from anybody. Super frustrating in this town. Ms. Coughlin actually sent Mr. Broussard email so we could set up a quick meeting. No responses, so it's kind of frustrating working with the town here, and it's a simple matter. It's look, if this was 10 feet of fence, I'd say hell with it. I'm just going to do it myself here. It's 450 feet of fencing.
Clearly, when the town does take ownership of the public ways, the town is responsible for maintenance of everything in the right of way. I mean, particularly the town generally is responsible for taking care of sidewalks. That's pretty customary. I don't think it's very common for there to be fences on town ways, on town property, which that may be part of the issue, that DPW doesn't have any fences for which they are responsible. So this might be a first. And I don't recall the extent to which this was discussed during our review process. I don't recall this level of detail being discussed. Yeah, I am pretty certain that ultimately the DPW will be responsible for taking care of the sidewalk, as well as the curbs, as well as the streets, drainage, of course. But the DPW may not customarily may not have any fences currently sitting in the right of way. So this may be a unique situation, which ultimately whatever is in the town right of way, the town is responsible for. And if the town does not wish to take responsibility for the fence, then probably the fence is going to have to go.
So that was one of the issues Ms. Coughlin and I spoke about. The fence was put in on both sides of the street for a reason. When the development was originally designed, we said, hey, we don't want people walking down across. And they said, oh, no problem, the fence is going in. That's really the extent of the discussion, if you will, that we had back then.
Yes. So it's entirely possible, to the extent that I remember, what was and might not have been discussed during this, is that it's possible that the ultimate, the precise location and responsibility for the fence may not have been adequately spelled out.
Correct. So how a couple of issues. So I've raised, to Mr. McGoldrick and to Ms. Coughlin, the developer up until about 3 years ago was maintaining it. They completely stopped. They were coming, they were mowing the lawn once a year, they were cutting the shrubs, whatever. That stopped. We can't seem to get them to respond. The last communication from Mr. McGoldrick, there was something to the effect that we can't get the developer to do anything unless it's criminal. We have no disposition of bonds or anything like that unless it's a criminal. And I said, well, how do you get them to come and do what they're supposed to do? We can't, is what I was told. Respectfully, I find that hard to believe. So how do we get the developer out there until the determination of completeness is done to actually maintain what they're supposed to?
The determination, yes, but acceptance at town meeting is actually when responsibility moves, and you can object at town meeting, or you can tell them you're going to object at town meeting to acceptance.
We've done that.
Yeah, and
He's basically said,
yeah.
go pound sand.
I don't know. Did town council have anything to say about this?
Yeah, town council agreed that the town should not maintain the fence or the landscaping.
At this point?
Yeah, at this point, and also going forward, because the DPW had already confirmed that they are unable to take this on. So they offered to remove the fence, and that's all that they could do.
The fence was installed for a reason specifically, and I mean, we've discussed, replacing it with a no maintenance fence so the town doesn't have to maintain it moving forward. But what we were told is the town approved that because we're being responsible for it, so you don't have a say in the matter. So we're kind
Do
of.
you have a record of the town approving?
So that was on site. The site superintendent for the developer, Mr. Layden, initially, and myself and Mr. Wager met, and he brought a sketch, drawing, whatever you want to call it. He showed it to us, and what is that being made out of? Oh, it's a wood fence. We use it everywhere. It's black. We stain it black. And we raised the issue. We said, who's maintaining this? A wood fence in New England? Come on. And they said, towns approved it. You don't really have a say in the matter.
So, Fiona, has there been anything that your office has been able to pull up in terms of written communication on, between Mr. Layden or Mr. McGoldrick regarding that fence and,
Yeah.
what was said?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things that I did when this issue was brought to my attention was I looked up the most recent site visit report. So Mr. McGoldrick produced a report in October of 2022 regarding a list of items that needed to be complete before the developer could even think about starting to file for the determination of completeness. We went out there, myself and Graves Engineering, we went out and checked, and most of those conditions were met. I did also follow up with Mr. Layden because he had the institutional knowledge I just didn't have being here just a short while. He brought to my attention, obviously I had looked at the definitive plan decision, but also finding 16 where the applicant agreed to work with the abutter to provide replacement screening in a mutually agreed upon location at the time of construction. There's also exhibits that, including specifically Exhibit 16, that basically it states that the developer should be responsible for providing that additional screening along the property line, as we know, as discussed during the public hearing process. So basically, most of the mitigation that was landed on was worked out between these conversations between property owners and the developer. I probably am not explaining this as well as I could have because I wasn't there, but the wood rail fence and the landscaping consisting of the shrubs and grasses that we see here, or within the drainage easement area where trees couldn't be planted, and this configuration came from multiple discussions of variety of parties, and ultimately Mr. Layden, as well as everyone else in town that I've spoken to, said that maintaining the fence and landscaping is not something that's possible for the town. We can remove the fence to maintain access to the easement, which is right here. But the best and really only feasible option is to discuss with the developer solutions that will be fair to Mr. Kaufman as well as the meet expectations. And
I'll say, unfortunately, I wasn't on the board when this was, approved, so I don't have any of that institutional knowledge on this one either. But I will say, besides that finding, there really wasn't anything that, unfortunately, in any conditions that talk about that fence at all.
correct, there's no language in the definitive plan decision that speaks to long-term maintenance of this fence and landscaping. I scoured.
Yeah, I'll say just out loud on a personal front, if this came before a town meeting with the fence as it is now, I wouldn't be apt to want to accept it without that fence getting it at the very least brought up to repair and in good shape. But that would be a town meeting vote. That is not a board.
No, and there's no way I would have agreed to maintain 450 feet of town fence in perpetuity. I mean, and it's not only what Ms. Coughlin had found was an agreement that the developer, basically he said, we want to make sure you're happy, look at this, and okay. There was no agreement with Mr. Wager on the other side, 94 Pleasant Street. So whatever you see here, you see on the opposite, not a great shot, on the opposite side. And Mr. Wager's side, from where, I apologize, a little hard to see, but from where the curb is to his white fence in the back, it's about 25, 30 feet. His fence is the property line. So from Pleasant Street all the way up, which is 300 feet, there's a 20-foot wide swath of lawn with a fence in it that nobody maintains as well. So there's a bigger issue here. It's not just myself. So even if that fence is removed, who's maintaining the lawn on either sides?
It's my impression that customarily the people just for a simple grass lawn, maybe with a sidewalk in it, but with a simple grass with no shrubs, the homeowner typically ends up mowing that grass, even though technically
It's
it's
town
the
property.
town's grass.
Right.
And the town theoretically ought to be responsible for it, but as a practical matter, the homeowners
There.
maintain
Right.
the portion of their frontage which is actually in the town's right of way. Normally, in most cases, that's not a problem. It's just a little bit more grass to mow.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
that's just the way people typically do it.
Right. No, there's planting, and I had mentioned to Ms. Coughlin that at the end of last year, I was cutting the shrubs on there because they were just overgrown. I believe it was someone from DPW came out and yelled at me and said, "Don't you know you're not supposed to touch anything or cut anything on town property?" I'm like, "Oh, my bad." Okay. So it's kind of a catch-22 here. We need to resolve this. A determination of completeness is coming up, and it needs to be addressed. So I'm not sure. As I said, I've tried, before Ms. Coughlin, Mr. McGoldrick, Mr. Broussard. Getting anybody to pay attention here is difficult at best. So what is the proper path forward here? Because the fence shouldn't be removed because it's there for a reason, and that's why it was originally installed there for a
What
reason.
reason?
So
Explain
it's
the reason.
basically keeping people from their dogs walking and politely crapping all over the place and walking across your lawn.
And let
And that's why
everybody
that was,
who has a lawn that goes out to the street is in the same spot.
I'm sorry?
And,
Clearly it was an oversight, from a maintenance
you know,
perspective.
this subdivision took a long
A
time.
long
and
time.
was not terribly easy.
That's being polite.
Well, you probably remember a lot of it.
Yes, sir.
Just off the top of the head, if the town accepts it with the fence, then you're gonna complain to the town administrator or to the DPW and
To fix
people
it.
they work for.
Yep.
That, they have, a decrepit fence in their space, and their answer is gonna be, I think, to take it down, cause they don't maintain fences. As to the plantings, I don't know, when they're trees, the town is responsible for the trees, I guess.
Yes, the town is generally responsible for trees that are planted in the right of way.
Or the town, the town, it's their trees. This is the town's bushes,
Right.
or whatever's. And you work that out with them as to,
Well, I tried.
yeah, but there's gonna be more trying, I
Yeah.
think.
Ultimately, if the town accepts this right away, the town takes responsibility for whatever is in the right of way, and the town has, as the owner of the right of way, the town then has the authority to do whatever it deems most appropriate for the town. And which, as this discussion has indicated, is likely to be removal of the fence.
Okay. And they're gonna remove all the plantings, some of the plantings cover
We
up.
don't know that.
They may or may not.
As I say, they, normally it's a question of trees, street trees, and, they have responsibility for the trees. But you'll have to talk, you're gonna have to have a conversation about whether the plantings,
So my question is, how do you have the conversations? Because I've been trying to do that for over 3 years now, and email response is non-existent.
At this point, since the town does not currently own that, the town may not have a great deal of interest in dealing with it. The town being the departments, the Department of Public Works, ultimately under the town administrator. But ultimately, this, the resolution of this is probably rests with the town administrator and the director of public works.
So,
But not much is likely to happen until it gets to the point of this becoming the town's responsibility, because right now it's not.
It needs to be discussed during the determination of
It should be,
completeness.
right, this should be taken into consideration when this board reviews the determination of completeness in preparation for acceptance of the right-of-way.
Right, and I don't know whether we would have a comment at town meeting acceptance or not. It depends on where we are at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah, but I think right now, probably sounds to me like the path forward is gonna run through the determination of completeness, and whatever leverage we have as part of the determination of completeness to answer questions about maintenance of the fence and the plantings.
And I will add as well that should this go to town meeting for acceptance, and if like you wanted to present pictures or something, that your best bet at that point, before town meeting would be to reach out to the town moderator. Right now it's Dawn Anderson, and and try to converse with her to see can you have a slide ready for your pictures, or so you can talk with to let the public know. But that'd be entirely up to the moderator on
I
acceptable
think
or
it's
not.
a little early.
Yeah,
You
it's
have
a little
find
early
out
to reach out to her for
You
sure.
have to
But
see what you've come down to before you
Yeah.
worry about what you want to.
I have two questions. One, would that solve the long-term maintenance issue? Because even after it's
No.
accepted, there would still be that.
the
no, I mean,
the town as as a town body would not be voting or deciding on the maintenance issue. That would be if the town votes to accept the road and the conditions for the road, then it is entirely up to the DPW and the administrator on on how to proceed with regards to the fencing on property
I
unless
would
something
think
else
that you
made.
tell town meeting that if you accept this, you've got a liability here.
you own
Yeah.
it, right? Right.
And
I mean-
And do you really want to accept, or do you want to be exposed to the liability?
Absolutely. Since I've heard that the determination of completeness has been going on for 3 years now, and they're almost ready, to do that. How do we get the
Every year or
Contract.
so, we hear something.
Something
on that light,
I'm
street
sure Ms.
lights or-
Coughlin will let me know when that meeting is going to be held, so I can be in attendance and provide the backup information. But since this development's been going on for almost 9 years now, almost ready to be completed, how do we get the developer to actually maintain it while they still own it?
I think ultimately that usually falls on essentially if it's two fronts. One is on our decision if it's something that is explicitly written in our decision or against the plan. That's one thing. But if the fence is there, it's just not in great repair. That might end up being a private matter as between you as someone that lives there and the developer themselves. And unfortunately, it's not.
I've got no leverage with the developer.
I
If I may, I have reached out to the developer about these concerns a few times. He did go out there and he did fix the fence, and I believe he did not address the landscaping. But it was brought to his attention multiple times. I do have, obviously in my role, the ability to be the liaison and will continue to be. I can follow up with him and confirm that, in the meantime, you, again, for
Still
the
need to
second or
maintain.
third time, I will follow up with him and tell him that he needs to get back out there and address the landscaping and be prepared. This is obviously an ongoing issue that they're aware of, and it'll come up during the determination of completeness, which is really the only time that the board here can actually make a decision on this. Until now, it's a conversation because there's nothing in front of the board to vote on. But yeah, I will absolutely follow up with him yet again, make sure that he gets out there. If there's any additional issues with the fence since he was out there a little while ago, let me know and I will bring that up.
Yeah, no, it's just
And-
the
and-
shrubs are overgrown. It's
Yep.
unsightly.
Yep, yep, absolutely. I will do that.
Is there an option? So let's say, for example, if the fence does come down, like an alternative type of solution there, that's pretty low maintenance that the DPW would take on. That
One of the things that I had suggested back then is like a vinyl split rail fence. Once they're in the ground, unless you run them over, they're pretty
I
much
don't think you're
lifetime.
gonna get that built halfway into the right of way. You're gonna get it built on the line, probably. But I don't, there's still a question of maintenance. Wonder if the, zoning enforcement officer has anything to say here, because this is, it's under a special permit.
I can check with,
You can check with him.
yes, I will.
Yeah, I mean, what leverage the town has over the developer is, at this point, through the zoning enforcement officer to enforce the conditions of special permit and subdivision approval. We have leverage over the determination of completeness, to the extent that the determination of completeness can be withheld until all conditions that can possibly be enforced have been satisfied. And that's really the leverage the town has over the developers, somewhat limited.
How much
That's what
security
it
do we
is.
still have?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. They do still need to release the bond. Natalia might be able to have that specific answer. But what I was going to say, actually, in that same vein, is that we can try and provide for the maintenance when the releasing of the bond process occurs, or we can try and have that conversation about some sort of compensation for long-term maintenance. That was a suggestion from the prior planner that I think that conversation had been had in the past. So, there's that as well. Natalia, I don't know if you have that figure in front of you. I'm sharing.
I don't have it off the top of my head. I'm trying to look it up, but it's the computer's slow. But I can have that figure available and I can let everybody know
It's a fair amount
thereafter.
of money, it's probably 6 digits to the left of the period.
I believe you're correct, because there was a meeting to reduce the bond, and I believe
Yeah,
it
but
is.
we
about
don't reduce it beyond a certain point.
Right.
And, there's
Right.
taking action, we can talk about what action we could take.
There's at least 20%. We always maintain.
Yes, that was my idea.
Mm-hmm.
30 years ago.
I mean,
Okay.
and ultimately with respect to the enforcement of conditions, if the developer is not responsive to any of the ordinary efforts of the zoning enforcement officer and the planning board and the town planner and the other officials and the various means that we have, ultimately there are the courts, which is a probably lengthy and certainly expensive process. But it's somewhat, indicative of the general problem we have with enforcing the zoning laws and all other town bylaws, is that as long as people are willing to do what the bylaws say, what the zoning laws say, it's really no problem. But when you have someone who steadfastly refuses, ultimately you have to resort to the courts.
Correct.
And that's an expensive and time-consuming process.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, and that gets the attention of all the players,
Yes.
the developer and folks down there.
No, absolutely.
So, I think we've beaten this up pretty well.
All right, so we
tonight.
will raise this as part of the conditions, if you will, on the determination of completeness hearing, see what we can work out. Again, this is not my house is falling over or anything like that, but, it is unsightly. The developer's been less than cooperative, and,
Yeah.
It's been too long.
Yeah.
It's been way too long for this development. Okay?
Is he still plowing the roads?
I think the word you use, plowing, is very generous. Okay?
Yes,
Well, you can explain to us about that too.
Natalia's hand is up.
Yeah.
Oh,
Great.
Natalia?
Thank you.
I
Natalia.
believe we have 150,000, but I will double check it.
How many?
Tomorrow morning.
150.
150.
1,000.
I believe. I want to double
All
check
right.
that tomorrow
Well,
morning.
that's enough to pay the lawyers.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate
Get
it.
the lawyers involved. Okay,
Coughlin, you'll follow up.
we'll move right along to 5 Mill Street.
Mr. Chair, if I may, it looks like there's a couple of questions in the Q&A.
Oh. All right, well,
Sorry, I did not see that until now.
because we didn't say anything about Q&A. We said raise hand, but if you find out something, let me know.
Sure. Would you, I can read this.
Yeah.
It's easiest. Sure. Someone attending virtually is stating, or asking, is there a bylaw that protects homeowners from developers who have abandoned neighborhoods and done no maintenance while waiting for a determination of completeness?
Oh, I
Do
think
we
that-
have a name to go with the question?
Nancy P.
Because, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, we need to know who's speaking.
Right.
And that's a fuzzy question. I don't know that.
I think
The bylaw department.
the literal answer to that is there is no bylaw that addresses the question that's being raised. The somewhat more comprehensive answer would be, I think, what I mentioned before, that there are, ultimately, for people who do not respond, to deal with violations, whether it's a violation of a condition of a permit, or a violation of a bylaw, or a violation of some other regulation. Ultimately, the enforcement mechanisms we have are somewhat limited, but for the most part, the enforcement mechanisms involve going to court. As a sort of a side comment, I will mention that the bylaw study committee is looking at questions about enforcement. There are some things that we can do to make enforcement a little bit more practical. The bylaw committee, however, is not looking at the zoning bylaw. That's a separate subject, which at some point we may want to look into. But even there, the mechanisms are somewhat limited. If someone really wants to be a scofflaw about it, the courts are the only, are the ultimate, method, and that's, as I said, time-consuming and expensive.
Okay, in the interest of going home tonight, let's move on to Mill Street.
Let's.
Does that sound like a plan?
I mean, Jane is here representing CMRPC, and I believe she will be sharing her screen, and she should have sharing privileges.
Yeah, but I'd set up, switch it so the panelists could share, so she should be able to.
She's muted.
I think Jane is having some technical difficulty right there, so she's going to drop and probably rejoin very soon. My apologies.
Who is that?
Wen Zhang is also works for CMRPC. Jane is having some technical difficulties right now.
No, I got it,
and
but
she's trying to
I
rejoin.
didn't get who was saying that she was having difficulties.
That is Wen Zhang Wang, who is
Oh, Wang,
employee,
Wang.
employee of
Okay.
CMRPC.
Well, if she's having difficulties, let's see if we can do something else pending fixing that. MBTA communities zoning. And let's get to what we need to do.
Yes, so that is, I will pull that up now. Hopefully this discussion will be relatively quick as, okay. So, all right, perfect. So, as the board knows, Grafton is an adjacent community through the new MBTA communities zoning law, section 3A, and we must comply. So we've been meeting regularly and decided on a final strategy. However, there is, I won't delve into the work so far because I think everybody at the board knows what we've done. This is just a summary of how we've got here, but basically the discussion today will be following up on the application for 5 Millennium Drive Subzone B to become for 5 Millennium Drive to become a Subzone B of the North Grafton Transit Village Overlay District. So there was provisions in the bylaw that allowed for a Subzone B, and now the property owner has decided to take advantage of that. And is currently working on an application to present to the select board at their meeting on July 18th to do this and become part of the 40R district. And they had requested being considered for MBTA communities compliance after running the numbers with the CMRPC team and in the compliance module. It makes sense. It also logistically is a great spot for this type of development. As mentioned before, and continue to mention, this is not a development mandate. It's, we don't have to, just because we're having an overlay zone in our designated districts doesn't force us to build to that extent, but you need to allow the zoning to allow 15 units an acre by right. So we're currently, we basically just want the board to assess this proposal and give their thoughts, any concerns that the board may have about using 5 Millennium toward compliance. As we know, it's right near it's right up here. Well, actually, sorry, it's for here. So I'm getting my lines crossed. Right here, and it's right near the T station, which is one of the core premises of the new law, is building transit-oriented development in communities, and makes perfect sense that it would be here. So this is the areas that we would have should the board agree. So obviously there a Pine Street location, our Fisherville overlay district, our 1727 Upton Street, 5 Millennium here, and then our VMU South Grafton area that we've designated and spoke about at our planning board meeting in April.
Okay. What does it take? Does it take a zoning amendment to make it to make this change?
The 40R will need to go before town meeting. This is for now, all we need is the board to confirm that this is the path that they want to pursue for MBTA compliance, but ultimately, yes, the final zoning will go before town meeting as well for approval.
It's a zoning change.
Yes.
And that would mean that property could be used for MBTA, zoning purposes for housing, or still what the underlying zone is.
Yes.
It's still, the point is, I was there, I have the hat for the groundbreaking of Centec Park.
Yes.
I should have worn that tonight.
Yes.
I've never worn it, except when I was out there. The idea then was that we really wanted to get some non-residential development to help balance out the taxes. This takes a property out of that. Why no one's ever been interested in that property, I don't know, but I know that it hasn't gone anywhere after all these years. Otherwise though, that would fall into the station the circle, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Most of the,
Yes.
the other property, someplace in all those numbers.
Yes.
Others, is it in the circle or is it outside? Well, it's in one of the tables.
It's right here.
Yes. Yes, the 5 Millennium Drive falls entirely within the half-mile radius of the station,
Right, which is,
so it combined those two sections of the North Grafton Transit Village Overlay District would result in almost 20 acres within the station area, where we are not required to have even 1 square foot of our MBT zoning within the station area.
Right.
So this is very consistent with the goals of 3A. And Bob, you and I think, share the same historical recollection that we created this area of town, starting with the zoning that we passed around 1992, and the subdivision, the Centex subdivision that was approved around 1996, with the intention of this being entirely commercial development. And as an overlay district, this still allows commercial development underneath. Yeah, so it's sort of, yeah, but it's interesting to note that in the nearly 30 years since we created that subdivision, nothing has been done on this particular parcel.
maybe 25 since it was developable. Getting the roads in wasn't as easy as they had hoped. And
Yes.
money and all that,
Yes.
But in any case, we don't need to go too far into that. Not gonna say, what I'll vote on when we have our hearing, because if it's zoning, we'll have a hearing. But it seems like a good thing to look for. Anybody disagree with me?
I think this makes sense.
Mr. Chair, there is a question as well.
Oh.
Just wanna bring that-
Yeah, the question, it's still in the Q&A.
Yes. So,
What happened to raise hand? But anyway, maybe we can't see the hand raised.
yeah.
Anyway, what's the question?
The question is there is a business, it's actually more of a statement. There is a business in this district who moved there under the auspices that it would be commercial/industrial.
No
And that
idea
is-
what
that
that's
is from
about.
Ann
Does
Foley.
does that have a name with it?
Yeah, that's from Ann Foley.
From Ann?
Ann Foley. Yes, so she submitted that
I
question.
don't know what she means.
I think she's stating that there is a business that is in that area. I believe she's referring to Primary Colors.
Yeah,
That's
I
down
think
at the other end of the road.
I
Primary
think the
Colors
big takeaway that might be missed here is that this would be an overlay district, so this would add extra allowable uses in that district. This would not remove the ability for any commercial or industrial business to be usable there.
Right.
Right, yeah, no, Primary Colors, this is at the beginning of the side road. Isn't it?
Is Primary Colors at 9 Millennium Drive? Pretty sure it's the abutter.
Primary, well,
It's the abutter to this
It's a-
property.
as you drive in, Primary Colors is at the cul-de-sac at the end of the road,
Okay.
up on the hill. This is as you drive in along the left side, I think right after, the lab that's there at the corner.
IDEX is the one at the corner. IDEX is the one at the corner.
IDEX. In any case,
Right.
be that, they'll be able to come and talk to us about that. Anybody with anything else on this? No. Moving on, have we solved our problems for 5 Mill Street?
Good evening. Yes, we have.
Thank you.
I could hear you and everything was working fine until I tried to turn on my camera and my audio and then it froze up. So I apologize for that.
If anything can go wrong, it probably already has. Go ahead. Well,
Alrighty.
Fiona and
Sure, absolutely. So Jane, I'll do a brief intro and then I'll hand it over to you.
Sure.
As the board knows, but also bringing up again for anyone new to the public, that we are working on the Whitney park designs. We're looking at a more affordable option as well as a more expensive option to implement some of the strategies that we've heard at our workshop, as well as from the public throughout this process, which has been going on since, Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, February?
I think so.
Yes, so we are trying to wrap up our concepts and get basically have a direction with our 2 final layouts as well as an implementation strategy, so that we can eventually take this to town meeting and execute the preferred strategy. So Jane is going to discuss what her and Wenzang and their team have come up with since our workshop and since all of our information gathering has started.
Thank you, Fiona. I'm going to breeze through some of these beginning ones because you've already seen these at previous meetings, looking at the different land use areas and the areas surrounding the parks. We were primarily looking at Whitney Park at 5 Mill Street. And then at the last meeting, there was discussion about creating a connection and maybe some improvements to the Perry Hill Park. After hearing some of the discussion at the last meeting, we revised the plan so that more of the active recreation is in the Perry Hill Park and passive recreation in the 5 Mill Street Whitney Park. There was also concern at the workshop from some of the residents in the area about traffic flow, cut through traffic to avoid a red light. There were recommendations for possibly some one-way streets to try to deter people from trying to cut through. And so that is an option. The first phase, we also talked last time about trying to develop a phasing plan for how this might develop, given that there's limited funding for starting the project, but should the town be able to obtain additional funding for later phases, how would we do that over time? So the first phase would include that center planter area with benches and trash cans and other features that I'll show you in just a couple of minutes. The second phase would be the traffic calming, which has very limited expense associated with it because it's mostly just some signage and maybe some roadway painting directing traffic. There was discussion at the last meeting about having at least one structure on the property. The more expensive option last time had both a gazebo and a pavilion. This revised plan only includes the pavilion. That can change, though. There are pavilions that are shaped more like a gazebo. The fourth phase would have to do with outdoor fitness. There was discussion last time about the maintenance and durability of this type of equipment. I've talked to people with manufacturers, with a nonprofit that works with AARP and trying to get outdoor fitness equipment in every state to try to encourage fitness. And I also spoke with someone in City of Worcester Parks Department. And this equipment is made by the same companies that make other park playground equipment, and it's made to be durable, to withstand the weather. The one in the center is actually at the senior center in Worcester. That particular one was funded by AARP, and the organization that was working with the city and AARP on that also helps communities to try to identify possible funding. As far as the durability goes, the planner from the City of Worcester was saying they also have another one at Castle Park in Worcester. Their main concern with it isn't with the maintenance and durability. It needs minimal maintenance, but they do try to avoid adjustable things. Moving parts are okay, but not adjustable items. Those tend to be, the concern is mostly about vandalism or damage. And the last phase would be the connection between the two parks. And if the town prefers, that could be moved up to an earlier phase, but that's the way that we at least broke them up to try to develop an approach to getting it all to happen. And so the overall site plan would include all of those features, and I will show you a more detailed plan shortly. If there are no questions just yet, I will pull up another plan. Are there any questions?
I have some. I can wait till the end.
You'll wait, okay. Okay. So I do have a phased cost estimate. Wenzheng, do you have that cost estimate that I sent out today?
I believe I do. I will.
Oh, it just came up.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry, it was just taking a minute to come up. So this is broken down by phase, with the first phase including demolition of the existing walkway, repairing the retaining wall, installing the planter in the center with just stone dust pathways going to it, pouring concrete bench pads and adding 6 benches, trash containers, dog waste stations, bicycle rack, trees, shrubs, perennial grasses. If you wanted some spring color like daffodils, they are pretty much self-sufficient and don't really need care. Annuals would need care, but if the town wants to have some annual color in the summer, that might be an option, as well as some topsoil and some mulch. And based on these amounts, that first phase would total $51,448. There are some variables such as, would the planter just be at grade, or would it be something more like a raised seating wall? And if it was a little higher, then the amount of fill and topsoil would vary. Phase 2 would be the traffic calming, which would primarily be signage. Street painting can also be done to try to direct the traffic, as well as painting the crosswalks. There's a lot of variables with the funding for street art. Several ways that you can go about it. It could be, a volunteer group in town. It could be a design competition, or a professional could be hired. And so that amount would vary depending on whether it's volunteers doing it, or the design competition, or hiring a professional. There are also a lot of variables in the type of pavilion that you choose, but the average cost we came up with was $54,200 for the pavilion, with site preparation, a concrete pad, bringing in electric and lighting, including 3 light posts, is $115,930. Phase 4 with the outdoor fitness. This is based on the Fit Lot design that is at the senior center. The city of Worcester is also in the finishing touches of their Colebrook Park off of Plantation Street, and there's another Fit Lot there. And that's similar to the one at the senior center that AARP funded. So this is what their estimates are for preparing the site, putting in a nice safety surface so people don't get hurt by falling or anything, plus the actual installation is $167,221. And the connection, the last phase, there'd be layout and grading forms and installation for the walkway, the paving material itself, and trees along that walkway, the connection comes to $13,340. And the caveat I have with this option is because there's some slope on the hill there, I would need to get a more detailed topographical map to see just how steep the grades are and whether or not by working with the slopes to do a curvilinear path, can you keep the grades low enough that you don't have to do ADA ramps? Because if ADA ramps are required, then it's going to be more expensive. But the total for all 5 phases is $353,059. And you'll be getting copies of this. They're just some notes. Fiona and I had talked earlier a couple months ago when she spoke with someone in Parks and I think the Highway Department about how town staff can do some of the work, such as planting trees, installing benches and the trash cans and such. And their labor could be counted as in-kind matches for additional funding that is being sought. As I mentioned, the annual plants can just be omitted if that's not something that the town wants the expense of or the maintenance of each year. And we could focus on drought tolerant perennials, shrubs, and grasses as well. I already mentioned that the depth of the topsoil would depend on how tall the planter is, and that street art will depend on whether it's a design competition, a professional, or a volunteer group who's doing the painting. And I do have some links here for information. The Bloomberg Philanthropy Association is involved with street art around the country. And this is a PDF flyer with information about the street art. There's also a couple of lists here for fitness equipment, including the nonprofit FitLaw organization. Then for a couple of comparisons, as far as the planters go, we see in the top one, it's very low to the ground. It would not need a lot of fill or topsoil. If you wanted something that was raised that you could see more from a distance and that could also serve as a steep wall, you could be looking at something more like this. And I mentioned earlier that there are some shelters. I mean, they don't look like the traditional wooden gazebos, but it's a shelter that's shaped more like a gazebo. It might be a nice compromise between having a rectangular pavilion or a more detailed gazebo. And looking at a monoslope styled pavilion, if you were going to be having concerts in the park, having that open end would really keep the visibility open to whoever is performing under the canopy there. This is a little bit more close up of the fit lot in the Worcester Senior Center with some more detailed designs of all of the equipment. But I just wanted to share some ideas with you. Let me stop sharing and I will pull up the actual site plans. Okay, this is the revised Plan A. Let me see about blowing this up a little bit.
With a little luck, maybe whatever software you're using there has a mode to just put the work area on the screen without all the tools and whatnot.
Can you see that?
Yes.
A bit.
Nope.
Do we have this plan in our documents in a better format, maybe that could be brought up?
We do have it in the meeting materials.
I didn't see all of, I don't think I found all of this detail. Maybe I did. But I don't know.
Just thinking it might be easier than trying
No.
to zoom in on
What,
Word.
what software is this that she's using?
This is in Word.
Microsoft Word.
I
It is
sent it
Word.
over in
I
a
don't need to
PDF
see all
though.
the Word crap. I need to see the work area.
How's that?
I'm bugging
Looks
them up
good.
there all the time when they do presentations about this.
So we have the central planter, which is our main feature, with some smaller ornamental trees around it and benches also there, and some shrubs. This walkway would just be stone dust, just for lower initial cost and not having to repair asphalt, with crosswalks both north and south, with power lines on the south side of the park. We're trying to avoid any trees there. It also adds some additional shade trees along the north and a little bit on the east side, with some signage about the parking. As I mentioned earlier, the traffic calming would be another phase. And if you have questions about this one, this might be a good time before I stop sharing this one and bring up the other one.
I see some arrows that I think are supposed to be about traffic flow, but they're a little confusing exactly what they're telling me. The one thing about, I think you're trying to make it one way around the park.
Yes.
And we may hear some objections from the people who live on the, I guess it's the south, what, is that the south side? I guess it's the south side. Because it'll be longer, but I don't know. I'm gonna be interested in who does what with this, all of this. So go ahead.
I don't know if we want to address a question that came in. Is there an outdoor fitness area that you mentioned at the senior center? And that is from Ann Foley. There will be in the next plan. So I'm sharing this one. All right. And the second plan, rather than has a little bit modified central planting area. I know that Mr. Whitney sent in comments today about wanting a gazebo. And based on the comments from the last meeting about having one structure, I included the pavilion here. And so this is still just a planting area. There was discussion last time about how it would be better to have the community garden at another park where there's area to have a larger area for the community garden. So that was removed from this plan. We would be looking at, as I mentioned, the Whitney Park would be more of a passive area and keeping more of the active recreation in the Perry Hill Park. And so we were looking at moving the senior fitness or adult fitness up here with a trail pathway to connect both of the two parks here and some additional trees for shade along the trail. And if I recall correctly, there were mixed opinions at the last meeting about whether the parking should be expanded. My recollection was that the extra parking was not to be installed, but that can easily be added back if that is preferred. And that would change the cost estimate. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Has our rec department given a positive view on utilizing Perry Hill as part of this with this expansion for concept B? Because last I knew that they were not clear what they had wanted to do at Perry Hill, but was thinking that even though it's near, it could be done, but they weren't sure. So I don't know if we're putting the cart before the horse with including Perry Hill in this design here.
I can answer that, Jane. Yes. So at the time this was brought to the attention of the rec department, and we've continued to have discussions. That Jane is right in terms of wanting to keep the active recreation to the north and the more kind of passive activities to the south at Whitney Park. The connection was something that I did bring up to the recreation director at the time. She said that they were evaluating and doing a separate master plan effort for existing facilities, and that we would need to touch base with the findings from that report and how it will flow into this effort. However, at first we had been trying to separate the two parks, as Perry Hill already has a playground, is actively in use. But what we heard at meetings and from a variety of folks, a connection was something that people wanted to see and thought it was logical. I agree with you, Justin, that it warrants more conversation, but the concept of having the connection, I think what came from people with a desire to make these two parks less separated.
Okay. And on a different tact, this is probably more for Jane. I appreciate the dollar figures down with the phasing and that breakout. My question though is, if we do it all in separate phases, does that change the price versus if somehow the town said we want we want to do it all right now? Does that make things cheaper if we do it all at once, or is it pretty broken up on just because it's all incremental?
The figures I got were like per square foot, per linear foot, per cubic yard. I don't know if a contractor would offer a better deal if he gets the whole project.
No, I can
likely.
certainly understand that. I was more, where your numbers came from, if that was foreseen as, all incremental, or how that would play out.
Yeah, some of them were like the FitLot exercise equipment one. Those were estimates from their guide. The state has a lot of estimates for projects that they're doing, and they use like consistent figures for, so much per linear foot of asphalt or so much per cubic yard of mulch. So I went over several of their projects, saw the consistent rate, and went with that based on the square footage that we're using, or the linear footage.
All right, wonderful. And I know we're not quite at that stage yet, Fiona. This might also be kind of partially for Jane, but do we have fundings, likely funding sources identified for, either all or part of this?
So we have 50,000 in ARPA. We have, I'll need to touch base with Evan because he did say, our town administrator did say that there was funding available for active recreation should we decide to pursue that. So that's also ARPA funding, and then the rest of the funding would be grants at this time. Yeah.
And what is the path forward for all of this? Who decides what, when?
Well, ultimately, the board would be.
This board?
Yeah.
Because we don't
preferred
usually
method.
build parks.
Well, the preferred, we are using the planning board, because the local rapid recovery plan it's an economic development plan, yes, but this is a core strategy, and the board was the primary board associated with that planning effort. So we're, utilizing the planning board as the decision-making entity, but
You I have trouble imagining voting, yes, build that park, from here. Certainly, you know, it seemed to me there'd be a lot of listening, once there was a plan, there'd be a lot of listening going on. But I would think the select board, and recreation and so on would be the parts of the government that do parks would be at the middle of it.
Or-
Anyway,
or driving it entirely.
whatever. I am curious, looks like a path from the main park up to behind the church.
Yes.
And it looks like there's a road with a tree and a path in the road. Now, I can't see it well enough to know whether that's true or not. See what I mean? Just to the, just to the right of the church.
Right in here.
Yeah,
So right of way is usually wider than the actual paved area. It's actually pretty narrow coming up this way.
yeah. I
we
wouldn't
can
count on
double
much with
check
those
that.
roads.
We were wanting to make sure we stayed off of the church property here.
Yeah. Well, okay, but okay, that's gonna be a little tricky, I think. But,
I think the detailed design will probably, should we ever get to a detailed design of this, that would be one of the obvious things to deal with.
oh, was there money in there for actual designs that would be put out for bidding and all that kind of thing? That usually adds a pretty good chunk.
No, we would need to add that for actual construction documents.
Okay. So what do we need to do tonight?
So the original contract was to come up with 2 designs. I don't know if this board wants to do one final phase design or stay with 2 separate designs. But we were looking for some final feedback and direction to provide the final plan and a report with recommendations to you.
So basically, with the completion of these 2 designs, A and B, that's what we had contracted with the Central Mass Regional Planning to do under this particular project for the local rapid recovery plan.
Yes.
And
Right.
once these designs have been delivered to us, then
We take it to the
we have some next steps that are really, that ball's in our court, the town's court, to decide where to go with those 2 designs.
yes.
Yeah, I think that there's gonna be a lot of movement afterwards, and I don't think we need to beat this too hard at this point.
No, I think, are we as a board comfortable with these 2 proposed designs, understanding what they represent and how much more work would ultimately have to be done to turn this into a reality?
Yeah, I'm not sure any of us realize how much work, but yes.
Yeah, I'll say
I'm
I-
afraid I realize.
I know at least one member of the public has, brought up some, individual concerns with, the designs, but I will say from what I've heard, this mostly aligns with what the public in the area has, expressed they'd liked.
Well, that's good.
And then, and the other thing I look at is I like having, both concepts. It does seem like concept B is for the most part just a slight, slight change, and then mostly just an addition over concept A. So I think that having both, at our fingertips for whichever department would take this on, along with that phasing, plan and CMRPC's recommendations that they'll be putting forward is probably good.
I mean, again, we have local rapid recovery funds available to us, which presumably have to be spent by some date, and if I remember it, it's like 2026.
Yes, that's correct.
So the funds are available through 2026. We now have a couple concepts in front of us. If from our perspective, this is what we wanted to see coming out of this part of the project, then
Yeah,
we take these plans and work internally to decide, how to proceed from there.
Yeah, I think
Right.
we're gonna have to work with the administrator and the select board at a minimum to figure out who does what
Yes.
and how.
Yeah, we don't need to nail that down tonight. But we
No,
understand
no,
that
but-
there are
and-
a lot of players that have to be involved.
Yeah, it,
Right. Right. Yeah. And this project was circulated for comment to all of the boards and commissions previously, and we've been continuing to collect comment from the public. We obviously had our community workshop and did a variety of outreach and continue to factor in the public's comments. And Jane and Wenzang, thank you for your work. I think you did a great job incorporating what we've heard thus far and what the board talked about at their previous meeting. And, you know, obviously the implementation will be on the town in terms of next steps, but this gives us a direction, and we'll continue to work with the select board, TA's office, Recreation Commission, et cetera, to, and then that, you know, once your contract ends, we'll
Prabhu's hand is
continue the
up.
who does?
process.
Prabhu?
Oh, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Go.
So I had a question. Two parts of the question, though. So Jane and Wenzing, thank you. I think both the proposals look great. But what I'm trying to understand is this is all the cost of acquisition, one-time build out. What's the cost? Phases otherwise. What's the cost of ownership on an ongoing basis? Is it going to be 10% of this cost? Are we looking at 30,000, 40,000? Do you guys have an estimate annually? What's going to be our expense?
I do not have that readily available.
Do you think it'll be a lot more than, any park maintenance? I don't see a lot of stuff that needs maintenance, much heavier maintenance than the Common or Airport Park or, you know, the Mill Villages. It comes with a growing town.
Right.
You get more people, you have more parks, you spend more money maintaining your parks, the same as your roads and your everything else.
Right.
Okay, I'd like us to all be able to go home tonight. That's why I keep asking.
I do have a couple questions though.
Yeah.
Are we still in agreement that the passive recreation should stay at the Whitney Park? Or are we waiting to see what the park plan says about utilizing Perry Hill for anything?
I'll say, at least for myself, that I think the passive recreation would fit much better at Whitney Park as it is than if we're splitting them. I think that, you know, trying to fit passive rec at Perry Hill is going to be a very tight squeeze and for little gain.
Yeah. Now, I think that, to me, it would be a great benefit to have a calm place in Whitney Park and have the kids running around yelling and doing whatever they do, shooting baskets, on the other side of the church.
And my other question was, do you want the phases to be changed in any way? The order of them?
Oh, that's too,
For
That-
now, I
that-
think it's good as is.
Yeah.
I think we should just,
Yeah.
I'm happy to say thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, bottom line is, I don't think I see any additional work that needs to be done on these plans as
Yeah.
presented.
Yep. And I think the phasing as well is structured in such a way that it should not be hard to rearrange the phasing for, you know, when the staff wants to do it. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There wasn't
Have a good
anybody,
evening.
else. No.
Don't see any other hands raised.
Hopefully we didn't miss anybody. Okay,
Good night.
good night. Thank you. Alrighty. 17 and 27 Upton Street concept plans. John M. Grant.
Okay, I will do a brief intro. So I have been speaking with GSX about this. I did conduct an analysis of the zoning and had been speaking to John, who's here tonight.
You can sit or stand.
Why don't we sit, and then you can sit there and I'll sit here.
Okay. This is Gene Christie, our
Hi.
engineer.
Hopefully one of those two microphones will hear you, and hopefully one of
I'll
those two
speak
mics will
loud
hear
enough.
you.
Thank you.
So John, I guess I'll just let you take it away, and Jean as well. But yeah, so we did debrief, and we did analyze the zoning together, which that information is published in the meeting materials, and we were going back and forth about a couple of things, but I think that the concepts as presented, obviously tonight we're trying to get the board's, feedback on this preliminary version, and then we, in advance of the team filing, then they can incorporate what they hear tonight and go from there. So it's really almost a development team meeting, but from the board's perspective.
So I'm John Grant. I live at 2425 Southeast 9th Street in Pompano Beach, Florida. I'm the president of GSX. GSX is also a partner on 8 Pine Street as well. We have been putting this project together for quite some time now, and we've brought along with us our notable civil engineer and coordinator up in this town. I'll introduce Jean.
Jean Christie, senior engineer with Time Bond.
I seem to recall we met you on the 8 Pine Street review.
Sure did.
So, one of the things we were concerned about, right? Oh, and we've also brought with us, quite notably, Bruce Spinney, from the Affordable Housing Trust, who is a co-sponsor of the project, in that we will have 25% affordable housing units in that project. And so the overall project that we're going to show you tonight consists of around 126 housing units spread between suites, 1-bedrooms, and 2-bedroom units. The building itself will contain quite a few amenities, a modern luxury apartment including dog washes and outdoor activity areas and a common club room. There's going to be even a demonstration kitchen off the club room. There'll be a leasing office, and there'll also be a private office workroom with a conference room, and there'll be quite a few other amenities, including enclosed trash areas and receiving areas for the project. I think maybe, can you get the site plan up? As you know, that the site's kind of an interesting site. It's bordered on all sides by wetlands, and I was going to let Jean talk to this, so I'll let Jean talk to this because she's the engineer.
Sure. So, I think we're all familiar with the site, some of the constraints of the site, being the former, highway department, DPW facility. Time Bond did do wetland delineation just to confirm the boundaries of the wetlands around the site. We have that information. We know that we'll be talking with conservation about wetlands impacts and stormwater management at some point. I expect we'll have a similar meeting with them, prior to filing anything, kind of pre-application meeting style. And so looking at the plan in front of you, the only place where there are not wetlands is Upton Street. You can see kind of as our limit of work line is a dashed line around the outside. Maybe a little difficult to see here. But that, there are some wetland impacts that we are proposing at this time. The wetlands are, let's say, the line is very jagged. It's not very consistent. There may be opportunities to improve that wetland by providing a different layout, but that's to come later with conservation, so not your jurisdiction.
One of the things that we should talk about is that one of the things that this does not comport to, which is in the zoning, is that there was an issue about trying to take urban properties like this and put the parking behind the buildings and put the buildings up on the street front. One of the problems with that in this design, well, there's two actual problems with it. One of the problems is we didn't want to have the wetlands back in the parking back in the wetlands, or any of that would drain, anything coming off the parking lot would drain into the wetlands. We wanted to be able to, when we're taking the snow off and things like that, take it out to the front and push it into piles on the front of the property. In fact, we even have our stormwater management system on the front of the property as well. The other problem is quite typically that we do have a firehouse across from it. And obviously there's going to be a certain amount of disturbance You know, one of the other things we do is assisted and senior living facilities. We know that that fire engine goes out with the emergency truck, and they're really pretty loud. And so we tried to put that back, or we're going to put some street trees in there to try and muffle as much of the sound as possible. But we thought the building deserved to be set back away from that, because it would probably be pretty piercing with the lights and everything if you're right on top of it, which is what we were doing. What we decided to do instead was to put a wall and a green wall out front to block your view of the trees themselves, of the parking field itself, and to try and make the building comport with the vocabulary of the town, to try to also provide adequate parking. One of the other challenges of the site, as you're aware, I think, is that it's 8 acres, but it's, you know, a parcel here that you can use and a parcel there you can use. And since they don't come together, one of the things that we're proposing is to join the two parcels via sidewalk and put a parking lot on the one side as well as on the other side. We also proposed to remove the barn and to put around 88 parking spaces on the other site, and around 114 parking spaces on the site adjacent to the building. That would mean that some people are going to walk between those two, and so what we're suggesting is to put a brand new sidewalk system in all the way from one to the other, which would probably make sense for the whole community. One of the future issues, one of the future thoughts we have is to buy the duplex that's immediately adjacent, and to raise that building and to put some parking in there and possibly have additional usable space for additional housing on the other site. So that was sort of what we're working with right now. But for right now, one of the things we wanted to come before the board with was the desire on our part to get a special permit to increase the density of the site up to 126 units, which will allow us then also to increase the density of the affordable housing to 32 units of affordable housing, which is essentially going to be counted as 25% of the overall, which allows all the units, all 126, to be counted as affordable housing units back to the city. Beyond that, I mean, you know, the other things that we're challenged by, but we've actually done a level 2 environmental on the site, and you know, we've put aside $1 million in our budget to handle environmental on the site. We don't think it's going to be, you know, even half of that much, but we thought it was better to be safe than sorry. We don't know there's any radioactive material there, but we think there's probably a lot of diesel fuel and other things that they used when they were cleaning equipment in that operation.
Yeah, I think given some recent experience in other projects in town, it's better to overestimate the remediation required than it is to underestimate it, because you're usually surprised when you start digging.
Yeah, and I think Gene's company, one of the nice things about Ty and Bond is they include a lot of different engineering groups, so that we can look holistically at the design of the site, as well as the design of the environment, as well as the design of the wetlands and things like that. And Gene's been really good about it. So Gene, I'll stop talking and let you talk. So I'm sorry. Go ahead and talk.
I don't know what else we want to talk about, if we really want to talk about any of the environmental stuff at this point, or talking about more of the aspects of the project, like why we have the stormwater where we have, things like that.
I do have two questions that came to mind just from what was already mentioned. You know, if I may, Mr. Chair, I get that as yes. So, the first question is, you know, where you're mentioning about wanting to do a special permit to increase the density. Is there any other waivers that relate to doing that you'd be seeking?
Well, the one waiver would be, of course, putting the parking in the front rather than the back.
Yep.
Okay, and we're probably going to want to have, well, actually, both parking lots are on our property, so it's all part of the same site.
Yep.
We are within 300 feet of the huge library parking lot, and we may want to associate with that parking lot for additional guest parking, but I don't think it's going to be required. I think we're going to be able to meet our parking requirement in this, but if we don't, what I'd like to do is get a waiver so we can create the associated parking in the parking lot for the library.
The library parking is the absolute minimum that that building has to have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the
There was a
other
real big shoehorn used to build that library.
Okay. Okay, well, we weren't aware of that when we looked at it, so we'll make sure that we fit everything on the site that we have there.
Yeah.
And, we need 214 spaces, and right now I've got about 200. So, I'll find another 14 spaces somewhere.
and yeah, the other comment that I was thinking in my own head is that, you know, kind of, you know, multi-part thing, that it would be a lot more beneficial in my mind for this site if there's at least one parking spot per residence in the main parking area. You know, I know that you need more than one for, you know, like 1 point something.
Well, we actually had that originally, but we pulled back from the side property line over there, 10 feet. And when we did that, we lost, and also from the front yard line. Now, I guess we could go for a waiver and put in a solid wall on the front with green space in front of it and push out, because what happens is that street's at an angle like this and our parking is like this. So out here, we're 15 or 20 feet back. Over here, we're like 3 feet or 4 feet back, okay?
Yeah.
So if we were able to do this as a straight line, I can get all the parking spaces I need to do that here. We're gonna come back to you.
Yeah.
And, that's why I wanna talk with you a little bit about that, but, I think we can make it so it's an attractive look, and we've done some renderings that we'd like to share with you too, to give you an idea of what we're looking at. One of the things we talked about originally was we were able to meet the 50-foot height requirement of the building, but as I guess one of the questions I was going to ask you is the 50 feet to the ridge line of the building, or is it to the midpoint of the roof?
I think we've always considered it to be to the ridge.
Okay, this is to the ridge. And I know there's nothing that you can do within waivers to increase height in this, without going for a zoning change. So I'm not even gonna ask for that, because I would like to get this done in my lifetime. So far,
The
I've
the
had
other
2 years' experience with this.
Yeah.
So, so if this is suitable, what we'll try and do is maybe rake some of those other roofs in the gable ends down and make them a little more exciting in terms of architectural vocabulary.
Yep.
Other than that, I think it's a pretty neat building. We have a nice mixture of materials. We have brick, we have stone, we have cement board, and it's going to be a handsome building and something you guys can be proud of. One of the other questions I was going to have, is the ability to go above 50 feet with chimneys?
I don't think we've ever asked that.
I think I was reading somewhere in our zoning relatively recently, and things like chimneys can extend above the height limit. You know, chimneys, antenna structures, there's certain
Water.
certain things that can extend above the height limit.
And
I couldn't tell you all of those off the top of my head.
Those arguments, vertical. I'm an architect, all right?
Yep.
So one of my problems, I'm a recovering architect. So one of my problems is I want to get some vertical, strong lines here to bring the building up. And just as you have those sort of vertical, strong lines on the library that look like chimneys,
Yep.
I'd like to get some of that happening here to get some stronger vertical lines in. That's why I wanted to. That's why I wanted to sort of see what we could do with goosing these
the
gable roofs.
other comment I was going to make about the parking is, I know when there is events on our town common, parking is usually pretty tight in the area, and people will seek out open open parking. Like they park at the Grafton Inn's parking lot, they'll park at the library parking lot, they'll park all around. And at least thinking about people that are not intimately familiar with like this property and how that is actually two properties, they'll see what looks like an empty parking lot, and in my mind they're going to be like, okay, well I'll park here and you can go to the common, and then you might be having resident issues with parking and
It's more than likely we'll put a gate on it and have a card. I mean, those aren't very expensive anymore.
Yeah.
And unless someone wants to break the gate, I don't think that's going to happen here.
yeah.
I don't know what to think. this has been going on before other bodies, and I know very little about it. I haven't seen this. There's apparently a famous agreement or deed or whatever that lays out the 25% requirement. And I'm going to be interested to see all of that, to see, what constraints that has. At first, 8 Pine Street. What's happening?
Well, it's trying to get moving financially. I mean, right now, the interest rates have gone up like 4% from where we started out at. Now, that doesn't. One of the interesting things that's happening is it looks like construction prices are starting to rocket down. And the reason is because all these contractors are seeing all their workloads drop off like rocks. I've been told yesterday that the electrical switchgear guys have finally caught up with their demand. But that sounds stupid, but it's a big deal because basically they were charging 3 times as much for switchgear because they could get it. Because people needed the switchgear to complete a project, so they paid anything they could. So what we're watching, hopefully, is the price of construction coming down. Okay, I don't know. We're hoping that somewhere when these guys become unemployed, that all of a sudden we'll see interest rates come down and there'll be a convergence. There was a convergence like this in 2008 and 2009, and when we were building then, all of a sudden interest rates dove, and construction was. Guys were just doing projects to keep the trucks.
We think we'd be really interested in there's an issue about the credits. I never know the acronyms of but we have to have 10% or be in safe harbor.
Well, you have a 25% on that project as well.
Yeah. Right now, that project doesn't count toward the ASHI because.
See, that's the.
Yeah,
That's because that's the concern, and
building permits have not been issued for 8 Pine Street.
And therefore we're not in safe harbor.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a considerable concern. I'll get to. You said rentals, so we get to count the 100%. Okay. Did you say the barn is?
Barn's gonna go. It's not historic. We already traced it back. It's just a barn, and we need the parking.
Compared to some early concept plans for this property, this is a big change, but presumably this is more realistic.
I'm concerned about where this is going to end up going. What'll happen in here when you come in with plans? I see a smile back there. I remember, I'm probably the only one in the room, well, maybe one other, remembers the last time the town tried to put something on that property. They tried to rent out a chunk at the back for a cell tower. And it was not a pleasant process. And we ended up winning in federal court because the tower was too high and impacted the historic district.
Right around the
And
corner.
when we we recommended this VMU GW zoning to town meeting, and they approved it with the language that the purpose was to restore the traditional village character in this area, promote opportunities for local small-scale businesses, and moderate density, mixed use, and residential uses. Moderate. And I think there'll be a fair amount, at least from me, of what is the visual impact going to be here. We're gonna.
Do you want to do 3D shots?
I looked at those and I wasn't at all sure I was happy with that. I drive up the road every day from to the Upton direction. And when I come up into that area, I wanna know I know what I'm looking at now, I wanna know what I'm gonna be looking at then. And then when I come home, I come back the other way, and I look at that area, and what will I be looking at now? And the reason that town meeting, or a reason the town meeting believed what this bylaw says, reasonable and all that sort of thing, is that we made it a special permit, so that there's discretion in that. So I think we will be looking at that. We'll see how much, it's quite possible that no one cares at this point, really. That was a long time ago, and the people who were most upset about it are no longer with us. Some good people. Did you want to tell us something?
Just provide clarification on the safe harbor status. Do you want me to do it up there?
Yeah.
Bruce Spinney, 71 Potter Hill Road. So for considerations for safe harbor, a special permit, if it were granted on this with the density, the capacity that's currently projected, or even some limitations to it, the entire unit count would count. DHC would go through the process, and that would give us an additional year of safe
Right.
harbor
But that would be
once the permit is granted.
once the building permits are granted.
The
The same
special
as
permit,
that-
once the special permit is granted,
Well,
DHC will consider it.
But there's a special permit at 8 Pine Street.
That is correct, and we got 1 year. We had 2 years. It's the second year we did not get. We had 1 year of safe harbor from that. We were supposed to get 2 because of the density. So as the rules are applied, if you reach a certain threshold, that 1% or whatever that number is, you would get a year of safe harbor. If you were to pursue past that, you would get an additional year. That additional year expired at a certain point because they had to have their building permit before that 1 year expired. So DHCD decided that we did not get a second year of safe harbor.
Yeah, you get, you get, when you issue the special permit, you get a limited, the 1 year, but sort of a two-step. The units go on to the SHI when the special permit is issued. They don't stay on unless a building permit is issued.
That is correct. So you would have a year here, and then once the building permit, of course, is issued, and this is a little bit easier of a project in that regard, then they become permanent and get locked in. Now this doesn't bring us to the 10%, but it brings us a good 100 feet down the road. So.
And I do want to make one, not DHCD SHI kind of comment, but about the parking in the front versus the back. At least for me, I do like it. For mostly residential units, I like the idea that the parking is in the front rather than the back for this location. You mentioned the fire truck. The one thing you may not be aware of is this town has basically old recycled sirens that
Air raid
sirens.
sirens.
That's the word I was looking for. Air raid sirens that go off when there is a fire goes. Mostly a volunteer fire department in this town. So one of those is on the fire station.
Call. It's on the new fire station, or is it
They
on the old fire
They
station?
moved it from the one on Worcester Street to this
Okay,
one.
because for a while it was still on Worcester Street.
Yeah, I used to live right next door to it.
It's part of the
Lovely.
small town charm. Everybody who lived there is
Yeah.
going to think it's cute.
But
Fine.
But yeah, when I lived right next door to it, it would every time I go off rattle rattle the windows, rattle the building. But that was literally less than 50 feet from my
After 3 or 4 months, you
farm.
won't even notice it.
But yeah, I think having some extra distance will be a benefit to people that are would move in there.
Yeah, I think on the question of the location of the parking lot, the village mixed use guidelines generally make a lot of sense for what they were designed for. I mean, the village mixed use zoning, all the rules and regulations and guidelines really are for a mixed use development design. That this is not very representative of what those rules are generally intended for. So in this particular case, it makes perfect sense to me for the parking to be located where it is. In different configurations, a larger mixed-use development, more of a mix of residential and commercial, keeping the parking away from the street makes a lot more sense, but it just doesn't work here.
Well, that's why it's not rigid. I mean, what's being used up here is a template of what we used down in South Grafton, which wasn't a very big heavy lift when we brought that before town meeting.
Yeah.
What was,
The South Grafton, the streetscape program and
Oh.
and Fisherville, and that extension of that overlay district when we moved it the rest of the way down the street, it of course fits there. What we did here, and you all know because you were here, is essentially spot zones the location with an overlay district. And I know nobody wants to say spot zoning, but it's kind
we
of
don't
what it
do
is.
spot zoning.
Of course.
It's not
So you
spot.
took the template and the skeleton of what we've deployed in other areas of town and put it here. The site is not entirely conducive to what I think our goals were back when we designed the overlay district for South Grafton. I think the idea behind it is good. I think you have to make it as marketable as possible for what you actually have there as far as a site. I mean, look at the site. It's a continuous lot that, doesn't have continuous frontage. It's a DPW building now. It'd be very difficult to find another use for it that's not going to make you, as you're driving by it every day, see a dilapidated DPW building. Because if the town gets its way, past performance being what it is, that DPW building is going to be there for 40 years unless you can find somebody to do something with it.
We
So,
tore down the barn on Adams Road.
how long did that take?
Oh, most of the time that I've lived in town,
Yeah.
which is more than a while.
I mean, the bridge on Pleasant Street was a 12-year thing. Stowe Road is going to be one way for.
Stowe Road is okay. George Hill Road, on the other hand,
Well, okay.
never mind.
Another thing that would take a decade.
Oh, it's been 2 decades since,
Yes.
never mind.
It's a very nice project utilizing the lands as best it can and most efficiently as it can to produce the density that's going to make it
Yeah,
market.
I understand. I just would like to say that, doing it this way, if there's really a pretty substantial amount of screening along the front, along the road, you may be able to convince me that you're dealing relatively well with the impact by not having the big long hunk of building
Sitting on top of you.
5 feet from the street,
Right.
but having, a large part of it back there, and really it's just an end
But and
view.
one thing this conceptual drawing doesn't show is the trees in the parking lot too.
Yeah.
Because there are tree planters in the parking lot, that's by code too, but this is basically, conceptual. So you'll get a more refined drawing showing the trees and things like that. The other thing is that, we're gonna put a brand new sidewalk in, at least a 6 foot wide or more like a 7 foot wide sidewalk in all the way down, which should make that a cleaner walk. And we've heard that we heard originally that the post office was closing and that was going to be opened as a commercial site, and that might actually help you drag people up the street through that. Is that
Yeah,
not true anymore?
I've heard the rumor, but I never seemed to hear it from something that seemed reliable. So
Yeah.
I've been hearing that one or another of all 3 post offices at some time or other have been getting ready to be closed, and none of them have.
Not holding my breath, but I think the only thing that I wish we could see here is some commercial mixed in with the residential.
Yeah.
But I also am aware that it's difficult to create a lot of commercial space. And I don't know what, to the extent to which you've thought of. I know the original plan for the first one we saw did have some commercial
We had some of
on
the
the
first
first floor.
in the first floor, and that was when we had a parking garage in the plan.
Yes, I remember
Unfortunately,
that.
you know, we want to get this financed and we want to get it built for you, so you get through the process. It's become, you know, it's become considerably more difficult to develop real estate, and people don't consider commercial space to have any value. So
Yeah, I think that- right, the economics of commercial real estate versus residential real estate are very different.
well, and then beyond that, the banks, everybody has lost faith in everything.
Yeah.
Which makes it really hard to do this, but we can do this. We've got the people who can
Well,
get it done now.
That's kind of the bottom line to me is this is something that you're,
You get done.
you seem to believe can be done.
Both projects can be done. This is a little bit more doable because it's not that big a lift. I mean, the other
Yeah.
project's $100 million lift. $100 million lift is tough even in good times, but in bad times, it becomes really tough.
I just had affordability. I think I more or less understand where where properties are sold. You know, they have to be sold for whatever, 80% of median value or whatever. And I think that continues, that's a deed restriction
This is all in perpetuity.
in perpetuity, but each time the sale happens, it gets calculated on the current.
This is not a for sale project.
Yeah,
It's a
this-
No,
rental.
no, but I'm,
That's how the
Getting
deeds
to it.
go. Yes, that's how if you were to have a condo here and you were to sell the condo, the restriction that would apply to all the owners. It's deed restricted. This is deed restricted as far as the parcel is concerned. DHCD handles the reporting functions and the auditing.
yeah, I haven't gotten to what I'm trying to ask.
Okay.
Let's say we're just talking about a purchase situation. I think up Flint Pond, I think they purchase, don't they?
You're talking about the ratio, the number, the
I'm
percentage
talking
of
about
market.
what happens the next time it's sold. When it's sold, when the current owner who bought it had 80% of median income or whatever the test is, and he got whatever the price, however the price was calculated.
Sure.
Now, 5 or 10 years later, the median income in the area has gone up.
Yep.
What happens how is that same number figured? It's figured on the new median income?
That is correct.
Okay, now what happens with rental? I'm gonna rent this place for 20 years. Does my rent change every time that the median income changed?
The assessment will be done, yeah. It's on an annual basis that everything's reported to DHCD or
Well,
whatever they're being called.
I'm the resident. I wanna know if my rent's going up.
Yeah, it doesn't say
So,
that.
so it's every time the median income is calculated, the rent may change.
It's a little bit more complicated than that on the rental side. It's a very convoluted process, as a matter of fact. But if you can't, they're like apples and oranges. On a deed, it's easy. You get the set price, you get the market value. If the market value goes up, you have a certain ratio that you can apply to that particular house. For rental units, it's a composite. It's a formula. So, it's based off what the average earner is in the area, not the market value of the actual property itself.
Yeah.
So when you calculate the, person who's going to rent here, it's based off of the AMI, which is an index of the average median index for income in the area. So as that goes up, then the rent in that particular unit can in fact go up to a certain threshold.
Probably important to
And
note
go down as well.
that on a subsidized rental unit, the rent is determined by the area median income, 80% of the area median, not by the income of the person renting,
That is correct.
which is different than the way the housing authority rents are calculated, but that's neither here nor there for us.
Separate.
Yeah, the housing
Separate
authority,
bureaucracy.
we work things differently.
Yeah.
Similar
Fine,
needs,
not gonna work.
different method.
This is
My,
not-
my thing is just simply, I'm a renter. Can I expect my rent to go up next year? Or is it all, and I think you said, yes, I could.
It can, yeah.
Okay.
It's not like some forms of rent control where your rent is not allowed to go up.
There's a whole bunch of, that is correct, it's not, but there's a whole bunch of thing else.
Yeah,
goes
the
into
way
that
it works,
formula.
but.
There's
but yes,
utilities and things
yes,
like that,
it
they're all
could go up.
built into that particular price.
If I've purchased a place, and, you know, it's a purchase type thing.
Yep.
Nothing changes for me until I go to sell.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Anybody?
So you want to get home tonight, so,
Yeah, we
I was
probably
gonna
do.
say, that there's not much, remaining for us to talk about. I was gonna ask you though, if you could throw me the perspectives on, because I want to just talk to them. Do you have the perspectives there? Now, of course, next time we come back to see you with our submission, we'll have more of this and more color and things like that, to show you, and trees and the parking
Yeah.
fields.
Yeah, I understand about making perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
I got A's in engineering drawing, okay, and 3D computer software. So a lot of the views are wide angle from selected views that make it look great. I'm interested in, when I'm in my car coming up the road and I see this,
I'll give you a video. I'll put you in your car.
okay.
You're 3 feet high. I'll take your eye, and we'll drive past the
Okay.
property.
Because that's where I think,
Yeah.
well,
That's okay. I
but
mean,
let's see, there are gonna be people interested in all that.
yeah,
I'm sure we can find a comparable,
sure.
in other
Oh,
areas.
yeah, if you have any other projects that are at all like this somewhere in the area, I might go for a drive and take a look.
We have in Hudson. It's not like this, but in
Let her know.
Hudson we have an independent assisted living. One part of it's apartments, the other part is assisted. In Amherst, we have an apartment project as well. So
Okay.
I'll
Well,
give you
let-
addresses and you guys can ride by. But Hudson is very close,
Okay, well,
and it's right
but
at the
pass
main.
it on to her and
Yeah.
she'll
Okay.
pass it on to us. Maybe even put it on the page, when we have a page.
So if I may, John, I just have the, this information that we updated the meeting materials. This is what I have. I don't have any, I have the concept plans, the narrative, the revised elevations, and then the concept plans of the barn.
Scroll down to the concept plans. You have 3Ds.
Yeah, there's about 8 or so,
Right.
images.
Eight shots.
I was a bit confused by
I only have
whether,
3 pages.
when-
Here you go.
and the elevation,
No,
the labeling of the elevations didn't quite,
Yeah, this
but,
isn't.
but that's,
Next time we'll
that's-
do that. If you're
No.
concerned about eye
Yeah.
level from your car, that's no problem.
Yeah.
So you set a point and then you drive the camera. That's all.
yeah, maybe going both ways.
The one that's with the elevations, if you go back to the thing with elevations
that-
and you scroll down.
We want to go home.
All right. There we go.
Sorry, okay.
Well, some of us do, I don't, yeah.
Yeah, I'm all set.
I take it that the trust is, in favor of this.
Yeah.
Agreement's been signed, so we'll get you a copy of it. So the gist of it is we're contributing to the soft cost pieces of this
No,
in a very limited fashion. And
yeah, well,
we get the 25%.
yeah, I'll be interested to see.
And in the future, when we put overlay districts in areas where we want a spot zone, we'll have the consideration to put the 25% in then. So, especially if they want a special permit
Okay,
and get
okay,
the density.
anyway,
All right.
Thank you, Bruce.
Do you have any questions beyond this?
not yet, I see we have someone else in the audience, do they have anything to say? Who, me? Okay, does anybody else have anything?
I just
Go.
had a comment. The zoning calls for 20 units an acre, so you're not at, John, I think you mentioned earlier that you were asking for increased density beyond what the zoning allows.
No, we're
This is-
Okay, just making sure that was clear to the board because.
Right. No, we're asking for the
You're-
special permit. which
Right,
You're
you're
at-
meeting the
takes us from
parameters
the one to
with
the
this.
other.
Right.
Yes, okay, just.
Right, the zoning allows 12 units per acre by right,
Right.
up to 20 with a special permit. The calculation here is about 18 per acre.
Right.
which brings it into special permit territory.
Correct.
If you scaled it down enough, you wouldn't even have to get a special permit.
Yeah, I think we have to make it, break even.
You wanna make it economically feasible or something?
We're just trying
Oh,
to.
there
do
you
that.
go. Yeah, there you go. That's one of the images.
We're like trying to make it so that we can put nice finishes on it too. That's the other part. It's gonna be a very nice place.
Yeah.
All right,
We won't be seeing that view too much. That's a back view.
yeah, that's the rear.
Yeah.
That faces the wetlands. The
Right.
wetlands will see it.
Keep going, keep going.
Yeah. I live up the hill behind there, but it's far
That's-
enough away that this
That's I guess that's
We're also putting a walking path, by the way, around the back of the building. They'll walk through the wetlands and around. So there'll be a path around the back, and I guess one of the things we have to see is if we can actually broach the edge of the wetlands with a path.
yeah.
A whole other conversation.
This
I know.
this one was a little confusing because it looked like. I think that this is. I can't see the label, but if it's like that, it's got to be from the back.
Yeah, it's the back corner.
And the
There's an outdoor pavilion on the right-hand side there. That's where it comes off of our club room. You can come outside from the club room.
but I was looking at the proportion, how big the part on the left was, but then keep going.
This is the last page, so I'll
That's,
go up.
well, there's one that I haven't seen yet. Maybe it's at the top. No, there, whoa.
There you go.
Whoa,
This one?
whoa.
Number
Yeah,
6?
go. Yeah, I'm puzzled about,
That's what you see when you're driving down, when you're driving back into town on Upton Street.
Driving toward the common on Upton Street.
you see that?
The road
Upton
is to
Street.
your left. Upton Street is at the bottom of the page, down here.
Oh,
That's Upton there, right at the bottom of the page.
oh, okay,
So
okay,
this is the
yeah,
back- this is the-
okay,
this is
that,
that side, okay?
yeah, I see it's,
You'll see it in the
I've got it,
There'll be a bunch
Okay.
of trees and wetlands in your way.
okay.
All right,
The further back you can get, more trees.
I know.
it'll probably be much better to look at than a falling apart shed.
We better be. I can guarantee it.
Salt shed, and served the building, served the town. I'm not saying well for,
Prabhu's hand is up.
I missed that.
okay. Is Sam thing still there?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I had a
Very
question.
nice evening.
Sorry.
Prabhu has
One
a
more
question.
Oh,
Sorry. So before you leave, at some point of time in future, when we get to more concrete plans, and I'm not too sure where we are in the process, when you mentioned about building out a sidewalk or a pavement connecting the second parking lot to the main property area, something similar to the conversation we had with the Pine Street project, who would be responsible for maintenance, snow plowing, and so on and so forth? Not for today. We definitely want these folks to go home. But at some point of time would want to have some better idea about those.
Yeah, I think there will, well, I'm not sure whether there's an answer there. But we're gonna wanna be sure we have a good sidewalk
Yeah.
all the way to the common, and going past the inn on your side is
railroad
tight,
tracks.
very tight.
And there's not much you can do there. Very,
Well, you're in the
But-
parking lot of the hotel, right? On the other
But
side of the railroad
the,
tracks?
right at the corner on the Grafton Inn, right there. It's a very thin very thin sidewalk, and one side is literally the building, the other side is the state road. So there's not much we can do as
And
far
I don't
as
know where the state
judging it.
layout actually is, but I do know that they used to put sandwich boards out there in the town, state, whoever's sidewalk. But that's really tight, so anyway,
Alright.
you'll discover all that, I think.
Sure we will.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice evening.
Oh dear. Okay. Just zipping right along. Bills, any bills? Did we have bills?
I think there were some bills. I'll move that
Yes.
we approve the bills.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion, hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
Mr. Davison.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mr. Becker-Trauman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassinger.
Minutes of previous meetings. Did we,
I don't
We had
believe
none.
we had any.
There are none.
no minutes. Staff report.
Okay, so, I wanted to make an announcement about the master plan workshop tomorrow at Apple Tree Arts from 6 to 8 p.m. Please join us if you can. We will be discussing the visioning, and the next steps for that will be fun interactive activities, and refreshments will be served. So I highly encourage folks to join us there. I wanted to discuss again the paving for the municipal center lot, and just announce that the planning department is going to be working fully remote that week, and considering, you know, all of the work that's going to be done, and in the interest of safety and avoiding people having to come to the municipal center, and you know, it just sounds like the best idea based on the information received is that we will be working from home, so the planning department will be available, but by appointment only. So please plan accordingly.
So that is July 17th until July 28th.
Correct. Yep. July 17th to the 28th. Night meetings will be happening as they normally are. So because the work will be done during the day, but just for purposes of getting the project done quickly and making it easier, we will be remote. So I have put I've scheduled an out of office. There was a sign at the window, and we're taking all of the precautions we can to notify the public. So we just want to brief the board on that. I did get some feedback about the survey for the GIS, that there's some complications with that. So please let me know what you need from me or to provide feedback. I'm happy to work with members of the board and anyone else who's having a hard time with that link. I know we talked about it at the last meeting, and I want to make sure that all the board's concerns and public's concerns are
Did
addressed.
anybody do it? That's what I thought. I tried to do it today, and I just got totally out of sorts by the third time, going through and finding things that I had done, changed, or red flagged as not acceptable, and it just, it was, I'd give an F to the developer of that form.
I went as far as looking at it briefly, but not trying to fill it out.
Yeah, the trouble is, it's asking me about, 95% of what it's asking me, I can't answer. I'm not in the building. I'm in 3 different things, and it's thinking I'm you or somebody, in the building. And it just, and it wants me to rank from 1 to 10, and every time I put a number in, it changes the number that I had put in before, and it's just, I use it as best I can.
Well,
Mission accomplished.
I'm happy to. I'm going to bring that feedback back to the AppGeo folks and try and figure out a more streamlined way to get the feedback, because I really do want to hear from the board their thoughts, because obviously GIS is extremely important to our
Well,
operations.
it's got to work on my computer easily and well, and that's a challenge.
Okay.
It's unstable. First of all, Macintoshes run this, and you're in trouble already, because they don't necessarily, but also when you're on High Sierra, which is about 20 versions back, it probably acts differently.
Yeah.
I'm not in Safari, but I'm in Chrome, which has just announced this is my last. This is my last for this thing. I think. Yeah. Or no, maybe it's for the Mac. Okay. Anyway, enough of that. Other stuff.
And just want to announce that we are still looking for an associate member for the planning board. So if anyone and the public is interested in listening, we encourage you to apply. It's a really important position. So I do want to state that here. And other than those immediate announcements, I don't want to keep everyone here all night, but we are our RFQ for the MBTA Communities Economic Feasibility Analysis is on the street. We're gathering responses through the 17th, so that is well underway. Continuing to work on all our long-range planning projects, as you know, but the focus really has been more on kind of the construction project management, application processing, technical assistance for applicants, et cetera, as of late, because we are very busy. So, the only other thing that I would say is I'm already been prepping for town meeting, but starting to really jump into that in earnest and prepare as early as possible. I have a running list of things. One being outdoor dining. That is something that has come up, and will probably continue to come up. So I would just flag that for the board as something that we, the zoning enforcement officer and I have talked about and are looking to try and see what we can do. The public has expressed wanting to see that and a little bit more flexibility there. I think there's other things we're looking at, definitions, use table, the incorporating the marijuana the feedback from the AG's office for the marijuana definitions as well. Relatively easy lift, and then of course our 40R zoning. Should we get our letter from EOHCL, I think it's now?
UHLC, Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities.
Thank you, Dave.
I've been trying very hard to memorize that, and I have not totally succeeded. It's just so much easier to say DHCD because it's been that way for almost forever.
Yeah, I wish they would just keep it the same, but yes, so that's, so once we get that letter and then, obviously our, additional zoning through MBTA communities. If the board has any questions or needs anything further from me, please let me know and I will, be working on it. But, I think that's, I'll keep it short.
Okay, correspondence. Have we reached closure on the issues about the detour?
Yeah, I thought we were initially I thought we were expecting it to go through the development. I didn't remember seeing anything further about that
We weren't.
conversation. And I guess when it was still Mr. McGoldrick and the police chief in Essex, they decided that it was a better choice to have it go fully around to the corner of East Street and where the railroad is.
But that was a condition in the decision, and
The-
it was overridden.
The condition as we wrote it was that they would present a plan to our agent and discuss with the chief of police and fire and establish that plan. So that was
Anyway, that one's put to bed.
yes.
Yeah, okay. The other thing this is the second case I've noticed where there was a constructive approval that upset me before, and I'm curious. We don't necessarily have to go into depth here, but I'm curious how we managed to get a constructive approval. I mean, I know how we got it. We do our best to avoid constructive approvals around here. And something happened, I know, but I'm interested in kind of what happened. Okay, anybody else on correspondence? No. Planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC?
Nothing for me.
Nothing yet.
Nothing? All right. Is there anything else that may lawfully come before us? In which case,
A motion to adjourn.
Second,
moved and seconded, not debatable. Roll call.
Mr. Robbins.
Aye.
Mr. Davison.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mr. Veckatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Hassinger.